The morning sun filtered softly through the sheer curtains, spilling light across the bedroom. I stirred beneath the warm blanket Jeremy had tucked around me the night before, a small comfort I barely noticed until the chill of the morning hinted at its absence. I stretched lightly, careful not to wake him. He always woke before me, brewing coffee or preparing breakfast in our small kitchen, taking care of the routines without fanfare. His love wasn't spoken. It was in the actions, always in the actions. Sliding out of bed, I found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee into our favorite cups. The quiet hum of the machine and the faint smell of toast filled the room. He glanced up as I entered, eyes soft, but he said nothing. Just the briefest nod, a faint smile, and back to his work. I moved to his side and reached for the cup. His hand brushed mine lightly as he set it down, lingering just a second longer than necessary. That was Jeremy, attentive, protective, loving, yet never with words. Breakfast was our quiet ritual. We ate together, sharing space and routine, but rarely conversation. Sometimes a few remarks about the news, sometimes a comment about the weather, but mostly silence. That silence had grown comfortable over the past 3 years, a language all our own. After breakfast, he handed me the folded laundry, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I've taken care of these," he said simply, almost understated, but the thought behind it was clear. I nodded, accepting the gesture, feeling the familiar warmth bloom in my chest. 3 years, 3 years of quiet companionship. A marriage arranged, yet seamless, comfortable, intimate in its simplicity. We shared a bed, a home, small daily gestures of love, yet words remained sparse. And somehow that worked, most of the time. Today felt slightly different. I couldn't place it at first, until a whisper from the past crossed my mind, a name I'd heard in passing, barely noticed. Sophia Stone. Her name stirred something unfamiliar in my chest, a small, prickling discomfort, a shadow I couldn't shake. She was Jeremy's first love, or so the gossip suggested, though he had never spoken of her. And yet, somehow, the thought of her made the silence between us feel heavier, more fragile. I shook my head, forcing the thought away. Jeremy didn't speak much, but his actions were always enough. Always. And yet, that small, quiet insecurity had begun to take root. Finishing breakfast, I moved to the window, sipping my coffee and watching the street below. Jeremy quietly tidied the kitchen, leaving small notes for me, a folded piece of paper with a reminder, a fresh flower in a tiny vase. I noticed them, appreciated them, but didn't comment. That was our life. Gestures instead of words, love instead of declarations. Later, as I prepared for the day, Jeremy touched my shoulder briefly. "Take care," he said softly, the first words directed solely at me that morning. I nodded, feeling the weight and warmth of them. 3 years in, and even the smallest words carried the gravity of deep affection. As I left the apartment, briefcase in hand, I cast one last glance at him. He waved lightly, eyes calm, expression unreadable, but I knew. I knew he would care for me in ways words never could. And for now, that was enough. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a whisper persisted. Sophia Stone, a ghost from the past, quiet, unassuming, yet already making the space between us feel just a little colder. The morning light was softer today, filtered through a slight haze of spring mist. I poured my coffee with careful precision, but my mind wasn't on the rich aroma or the warmth of the cup. It was on a name, Sophia Stone. I didn't even know why it had come to me this morning. A mutual friend mentioned her casually in passing. The whisper of her name sent a subtle shiver down my spine. Jeremy entered the kitchen, calm as ever, carrying the newspaper in one hand and a fresh croissant in the other. "Morning," he said, his voice low, almost gentle, but with the faint undertone of awareness that he always had. I nodded, keeping my gaze on the counter. "Morning." He placed the croissant beside my cup and brushed my hand lightly with his as he set it down. It was such a small gesture, one of 100 he did every day, and yet it made my chest tighten in ways I couldn't explain. I wanted to believe that the quiet rhythm of our life was enough, that his love was present even without words. But today, even that comfort felt fragile. At work, I found myself distracted. Every email, every call seemed like noise, background to the storm growing in my mind. I couldn't shake the thought of Sophia, of a woman who had once shared Jeremy's heart. I knew it was irrational. Jeremy had been with me for 3 years, had built a life with me, shared a bed with me, cared for me with actions that spoke louder than words. Yet my heart quivered with doubt. The shadow of Sophia Stone became almost tangible as I walked home that evening. A flyer on the community board, a photograph in a magazine at the bookstore, a casual mention by a passerby, all seemed to carry her name, all seemed to remind me that she existed, even if only in memory. By the time I reached our apartment, I was exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally drained from trying to fight a fear I couldn't name. Jeremy was already home, quietly preparing tea in the kitchen. He glanced at me, as always, with that calm, unspoken understanding. "Long day?" he asked softly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, very." He didn't press further. He never did. He trusted our unspoken connection, and yet the absence of conversation now felt like a chasm. I couldn't tell him how much the mere thought of Sophia made me ache, how much I feared being secondary in his heart. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, I noticed the familiar weight of his arm resting lightly across my shoulder. The comfort of his presence was almost unbearable, mingling with the growing uncertainty in my chest. I wanted to tell him how I felt, to demand reassurance, to speak my insecurities aloud. But I didn't. I lay still, silent, feeling the warmth of a man who loved me through action, and a shadow of a woman who might still linger in his past. And I realized, with quiet dread, that this shadow could either fade or grow, depending on whether I could confront it, or whether I allowed it to pull me away from the man who had always been my home. The mornings had grown harder. Not because of the routine. Jeremy still brewed my coffee with meticulous care, left little notes, adjusted the blanket when I slept in, but because each gesture, once comforting, now felt like a reminder of the distance I was creating. I found myself avoiding his touch more often, retreating slightly when he brushed my hair from my face or placed a hand on my shoulder. He noticed, of course, though he said nothing. Jeremy had always been observant, able to read the slightest change in my expression or posture, but his patience was endless, and he trusted the quiet rhythm of our unspoken bond. At work, my mind refused to settle. Every phone call, every email seemed background noise, the real story playing in my chest. Jeremy and Sophia. I knew it was irrational. Jeremy had built a life with me, 3 years of marriage, shared routines, shared bed, shared home, yet my mind refused to let go. On my commute home one evening, my unease spiked. I passed a small cafe and glimpsed a familiar silhouette through the glass. My heart stuttered. Sophia Stone. She was speaking with someone casually, laughing lightly, unaware of me. Not a single glance in my direction. And yet just seeing her made my chest tighten, my palms clammy. I stepped off the curb, pretending to check my phone, forcing my pulse to slow. I didn't approach. I did confront. I couldn't. By the time I reached home, Jeremy was already there, tidying the living room. The faint smell of dinner in the kitchen mixed with the softness of our shared home, usually comforting, now felt almost suffocating. He glanced up as I entered, eyes soft but questioning. "Long day?" he asked. I forced a nod. "Yes," I said, voice clipped. He didn't press. Never once did he push me to speak, but I could feel it, the quiet intensity simmering beneath his calm. He noticed everything, always. That night in our bedroom, I lay on my side, facing away from him. Jeremy's arms stretched across the pillow, brushing my back, a silent offer of closeness I ignored. He adjusted the blanket over me, careful not to disturb my withdrawal. The weight of his care pressed against me in ways I didn't want to admit. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Sophia. About why Jeremy remained so quiet, why he never shared his past or his feelings. My chest ached with the fear that my husband's heart still belonged, even partially, to a memory. And yet, the small actions he performed every day told another story. Coffee left on the table, a fresh flower in a vase, the way he always knew the perfect temperature for the blanket. Actions, not words. I pulled the sheets tighter around me, trying to convince myself that distance would protect me from this imagined heartbreak. But Jeremy's quiet intensity, his unwavering presence, made the act almost impossible. Somewhere in the house, I knew he could feel it, my retreat, my anxiety, my jealousy. And somewhere in me, I feared that if I continued pulling away, I might drive away the one man who had never spoken empty words to me. The morning air felt heavier than usual as I walked into the kitchen. Jeremy was already there, humming softly to himself as he arranged breakfast. I froze at the sight of him, remembering the fleeting moment from yesterday, Sophia's laugh, the graceful tilt of her head, the memory that had lodged itself in my chest like a thorn. And there he was in our kitchen, calm and composed, unaware of the storm brewing in me. "Morning," he said, placing my cup on the table. His voice was soft, gentle, almost soothing, but the faint tension in his posture didn't escape me. He had noticed, of course. I nodded, silent. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. Throughout the day, I felt a strange combination of longing and frustration. The true test came that afternoon. Walking home, I saw Jeremy speaking with her, Sophia Stone. They weren't close, not touching, not laughing in a way that spoke of intimacy, but the sight made my chest twist painfully. I gripped my bag tighter, forcing my heart to slow. I didn't want to confront him. I didn't want to create a scene. I just looked, and then turned away, swallowing the bitter taste in my throat. That night at home, the silence was heavier than usual. We prepared dinner in tandem, movements careful and precise, avoiding conversation. I could feel him watching me, his quiet gaze pressing against the walls I had built around my heart. As I sat across from him at the table, his hand brushed against mine. A small touch, fleeting, almost casual, but enough to make my pulse quicken. I looked up, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a flicker of intensity in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Later, as I prepared for bed, he came behind me and draped a blanket over my shoulders. I stiffened, unsure how to react. His hands lingered slightly longer than necessary, and I felt the weight of unspoken words pressing against the air between us. "Why are you pulling away?" he asked finally, voice low, calm but edged with something deeper. Concern, frustration, love all in one. I swallowed hard, shaking my head. I don't know, I just need space." He said nothing more, only adjusted the blanket, and for a moment I felt the quiet heat of his presence like a warning. That he was noticing, that he cared, that he would not let me slip away unnoticed. I lay in bed that night, facing away from him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Every small action, the blanket, the touches, the unspoken attentiveness, was a reminder that he loved me silently, that he had always loved me silently. And yet the shadow of Sophia Stone lingered, stretching between us. I couldn't tell whether it was a memory, a threat, or just my own fear. All I knew was that my heart ached with longing, jealousy, and a fear I couldn't voice. Tomorrow, I realized, would be another day of silent tension. Another day of unspoken emotions, of gestures instead of words, of love and fear mingling in the quiet rhythm of our home. The days had begun to blur together. Each morning, I forced myself to get up, to perform the same routines we had followed for 3 years, breakfast, coffee, quiet movements around the apartment. But the warmth that had once accompanied these rituals had turned cold, laced with annoying anxiety I could no longer ignore. I avoided him whenever I could. If he entered the kitchen, I busied myself with dishes, pretending to be absorbed in the routine. If he reached out, I flinched slightly, pulling back, careful not to give him the satisfaction of noticing. That afternoon, I left work early, claiming a headache, a minor excuse to escape. The streets were warmer now, spring brushing the edges of the city with soft green. I tried to lose myself in the motion of walking, but my heart refused to settle. Thoughts of Sophia Stone crept in relentlessly. Even as I reminded myself Jeremy had chosen me, that he had loved me silently every day for 3 years. And yet, the image of him with her lingered, teasing my mind with what-ifs. When I returned home, Jeremy was already there, arranging the living room with precise care. He hadn't touched the blanket on my side of the bed, hadn't left the little notes he normally did. The absence of his usual gestures struck me harder than any confrontation ever could. I tried to pretend not to notice. I sat at the table, glancing at my phone, trying to act absorbed in mundane messages, yet the tension was palpable. He watched me, silently, carefully, every muscle in his body attuned to my movements. Later, as I prepared to leave for a brief evening walk, he appeared in the doorway, blocking my path ever so slightly. His eyes were dark, intense, and unreadable. "You're avoiding me," he said softly. No anger, no accusation, just a quiet certainty. I stiffened. I just need some space," I said, my voice shaking slightly, betraying the anxiety I was trying to suppress. His lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't speak again but stepped aside, allowing me to leave. Yet the intensity in his gaze followed me all the way down the hallway. It wasn't just observation, it was a warning, a plea, a silent declaration. Do not walk away from what is yours. Outside, I walked faster, trying to escape my own swirling thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already gone too far, that my fear and jealousy were pushing him away even though his love had never wavered. Returning home later, I found him quietly adjusting the room, the blanket on my side of the bed now meticulously arranged. The tea I liked waiting on the table, still warm. A small gift I didn't recognize sat beside it, a delicate pen engraved with my initials. I felt a pang in my chest. Every gesture he made, every quiet action was him reaching for me without words. And yet, I had been pulling away, pushing against his care, doubting his heart. That night, lying in bed, I watched him across the room as he quietly read. His presence was steady, unwavering, and yet charged with intensity I had never noticed before. My jealousy, my fear, my longing, all mixed into a painful ache I couldn't name. I realized, with a quiet, fearful certainty, that if I didn't confront these feelings soon, the walls I was building around my heart might be harder to tear down than I ever imagined. And Jeremy, my silent, patient, intensely loving husband, was already watching, waiting, ready to cross any distance I created to reach me. I couldn't sleep. Not really. My thoughts circled endlessly, replaying the fleeting image from yesterday, Jeremy standing with Sophia Stone, her laugh so familiar, so effortless. I knew it wasn't what it seemed. He had always loved me through gestures, through quiet acts, through every small detail of our life. Yet my chest ached with doubt, jealousy, and an almost unbearable fear of being second in his heart. By morning, my agitation had turned into a storm. I avoided him at breakfast, speaking in clipped sentences, pretending the worry wasn't consuming me. He noticed, always. He poured my tea, adjusted the blanket on my chair, brushed a stray hair from my shoulder, gestures I usually cherished, and yet today they felt like accusations. Like proof that my heart was betraying me with every skipped glance, every flinch, every fleeting withdrawal. I couldn't take it anymore. After work, I returned home early, my emotions fraying. Jeremy was already there, quietly reading in the living room. The faint light of the afternoon filtering through the window cast a warm glow on his face, and I almost forgot my anger and jealousy. Almost. I stood in the doorway, hands trembling slightly. "Jeremy," I whispered, my voice shaking, we need to talk." He looked up, calm but attentive. The quiet intensity in his gaze made my chest tighten. "I'm listening," he said simply. I took a step closer, my resolve cracking. Stop playing this game. Are you trying to make me jealous? Is that why you keep doing all these things? Why you don't say anything? What do you want from me?" His calm gaze never wavered, but I could see it, a flicker of shock, of something deeper, of fear. "Maya," he began, but I didn't let him continue. "I can't take this anymore," I blurted, the words spilling from my heart like water breaking a dam. I love you, Jeremy. I have always loved you since childhood, and I can't pretend anymore." His eyes widened, and for a moment he was silent. The calm, unreadable man I had lived with for 3 years seemed frozen, words caught somewhere between thought and reality. "Maya," he whispered, reaching out toward me, voice low and trembling. I could see it now, the intensity I had always ignored, the love that had been present in every quiet act, every gesture, every touch. And yet, before he could speak, before he could confess the depth of his feelings, the door opened. Sophia Stone. No, not her. Not physically. Just the mention of her name, someone on the phone, a neighbor casually commenting, a reminder of that shadow. I recoiled, my cheeks burning, and fled the room. Jeremy didn't chase me. He didn't grab my hand. He simply watched as I disappeared down the hallway, the words he had prepared, the confession he had rehearsed in his mind for years, remaining unspoken. For the next 5 days, I avoided him entirely. I threw myself into work, social obligations, and distractions, all while my heart broke silently. I convinced myself that I had been rejected, that Jeremy's silence and measured gestures meant his heart was elsewhere. And Jeremy, he waited, patiently, intensely, knowing me too well to confront me without letting me approach the truth at my own pace. The apartment felt colder without him. Not physically, but emotionally, as if every wall, every piece of furniture echoed with the absence of his presence in my life, the absence I had chosen. For 5 days I had kept my distance, avoided his gaze, ignored his small gestures, turned down breakfast he set out, and retreated into my own world. The nights were the hardest. I lay awake in our shared bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart aching with a mixture of longing and fear. I imagined him across the room, quietly reading, adjusting the blanket, performing those small acts of care that always made my heart surge. And I hated myself for wanting them, even as I pushed him away. At work, I could barely concentrate. Every message, every phone call, every mundane task felt heavier than it should. Thoughts of Jeremy and Sophia teased my mind relentlessly. I imagined Sophia laughing at some joke, leaning close to him, her hand brushing his in a casual intimacy. My chest ached. I hated her, and yet I hated myself more for even imagining such a thing. Returning home that evening, I found something unusual. A tray had been left outside my bedroom door, tea still warm, a small plate with my favorite pastry, and a folded note in Jeremy's meticulous handwriting. I hesitated, hands trembling, afraid to open it. "I know you're hurting. I'm here, no words needed. Jay." I felt a pang in my chest, a mixture of guilt, relief, and longing. He hadn't confronted me. He hadn't demanded an explanation. He had simply left this gesture, small, quiet, and yet carrying the weight of everything he had ever felt for me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I retreated further, taking a long walk in the spring air, hoping the movement would calm my racing thoughts. But every step felt heavy. Every memory of Jeremy's careful gestures tormented me. I wanted to believe Sophia mattered, because it was easier than accepting that I had feared losing a man who had always been mine. The next morning, the ache continued. I moved around the apartment silently, avoiding him entirely. But he noticed anyway. Of course he noticed. A folded blanket on my chair, a fresh flower in the vase, coffee poured and waiting for me in my cup, each gesture precise, intentional, and impossible to ignore. By the 3rd day, my body began to betray me. Sleepless nights and emotional strain left me pale and tired. My hands shook slightly as I poured tea, my vision blurring with exhaustion. I barely heard him when he entered the room, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding, yet careful not to startle me. "Eat something," he said softly, his eyes scanning my face, nodding every shadow, every tremor. I'm fine," I murmured, trying to retreat into myself. He didn't insist. He didn't force me. Instead, he poured my tea, adjusted the blanket around my shoulders, and left a small plate of food before stepping back. Each motion spoke louder than words ever could. "I see you. I care for you. I am here always." But I remained stubborn, my heart locked behind walls of fear and jealousy. I feared that even now, after 3 years, I was not enough, that he still loved someone else more. And yet, each action, each quiet gesture, chipped away at my resolve, leaving me trembling, conflicted, and helplessly aware of my own feelings. On the 5th day, my body finally gave out. At work, I had collapsed briefly at my desk, and a kind colleague had helped me home. Jeremy was already there when I returned. He carried me into the bedroom with a quiet, intense care that made my heart ache. The weight of him, his presence, his love, his unspoken devotion, pressed against me in a way that was almost unbearable. He sat beside me, holding my hand, brushing my hair from my face. "You're hurting," he said softly, his voice low, deliberate. "Don't run from me, don't push me away." I swallowed hard, tears pricking my eyes. For the first time in days, I let myself feel the ache, the longing, the fear. And in that quiet moment, as he held me, the storm inside me, 5 days of silence, jealousy, and fear, began to break. Jeremy's actions, his intensity, his unwavering care, reminded me of what I had always known but tried to deny. He had always loved me. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe it. The morning sunlight poured through the curtains, painting the apartment in a gentle gold. Normally, I would have felt comfort in the routine. Breakfast set out, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the quiet hum of our home. But today, it felt like a spotlight on my guilt, my fear, and the stubborn walls I had built between Jeremy and me. I moved silently through the apartment, trying to avoid him. He was already there, adjusting the blanket on the chair beside the table, a soft note left near my cup. His presence was constant, calm, careful, and impossibly intense. "I know you're avoiding me. I'll be here when you're ready. Jay." I stared at the note, the ache in my chest growing. 5 days of silence, avoidance, and fear, and here he was, patient, unyielding, loving me in ways I had tried to deny. At work, I found it impossible to concentrate. Every mundane task, typing emails, answering phone calls, sorting files, felt heavy, meaningless. My mind drifted back to the small gestures he had left behind. The note, the tea, the blanket arranged just so. Each one was a reminder that he saw me, cared for me, loved me, and yet I had been blind to it. The real test came on my way home. As I walked through the park near our apartment, I saw him, Jeremy, speaking with someone. My heart seized. But it was Sophia. It was just a neighbor discussing a small problem about their apartment building. Even so, my chest ached, my mind racing, my heart betraying me with every imagined scenario. Returning home, I tried to retreat into my own world again. But Jeremy noticed. Of course he noticed. He didn't ask about my day or comment on my distance. Instead, he prepared my favorite meal quietly, adjusted the chair so I could sit comfortably, and poured the tea just the way I liked it. Every movement was precise, intentional, and impossible to ignore. I couldn't help it. My resolve cracked. I turned to him, eyes filling with tears. "Jeremy, I can't keep doing this," I whispered, voice trembling. "I've been pushing you away, but I can't. I'm so afraid of losing you." He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on my cheek, his thumb brushing against my trembling skin. "Maya," he began, voice low, almost reverent, "you could never lose me. Never." I felt the tension in my body melt slightly, but fear and vulnerability still held me in place. "But, Sophia, she was in your past. Do you still?" Jeremy's gaze hardened, not with anger, but with fierce intensity. "Maya Wilson, there is no Sophia in my heart. Never has been. You have been my life in every way for years. Every gesture, every silent moment, every morning, every night, it has always been for you." I stared at him, disbelief warring with hope. His voice was steady, unflinching, but there was fire beneath it, the kind of intensity that made me ache and tremble. I've been so foolish," I whispered, tears spilling freely. "I let my insecurities, my fear, I almost pushed you away." He cupped my face with both hands, pulling me closer until our foreheads touched. "You could never push me away, Maya. Never. I will always find my way to you. Always." The silence stretched between us, filled only with the sound of our shared breathing, the thrum of my heart echoing against his chest. For the first time in days, I felt the walls I had built around my heart crumble, replaced by a warmth and certainty I hadn't realized I'd been craving. And in that quiet, golden afternoon, I realized that Jeremy's love, quiet, intense, and unwavering, had never been in question. It had only waited for me to see it. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, soft and golden, brushing the edges of the apartment with warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke without the gnawing ache of doubt in my chest. Jeremy was already in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared breakfast, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. I smiled quietly to myself, my heart finally at peace. The distance, the fear, the jealousy, all of it had melted away. Everything that had kept us apart, even for a few days, seemed meaningless now. I had spoken my heart aloud, and he had met it, matched it, and loved me fiercely in return. "Morning," he said softly as I entered the kitchen, his eyes lighting up with a warmth that made my heart flutter. He handed me a cup of tea, and I took it, savoring the simple intimacy of the gesture. We moved through the morning routine like we always had breakfast together, the quiet clinking of dishes, the soft murmur of conversation, and gentle laughter that felt like music to my ears. But now it was different. Everything felt different. Every glance, every touch, every small act of care carried with it the depth of our unspoken emotions finally set free. As I carried my plate to the table, Jeremy reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "You slept well?" he asked, voice low, intense, and full of the quiet devotion that had always defined him. "I did," I murmured, feeling the warmth of his hand linger on my cheek. "Much better now." He didn't need words to answer. The soft smile in his eyes, the gentle squeeze of my hand, and the way he leaned closer to brush his lips to my forehead said everything. I leaned into him, letting the peace and love we had fought so hard to recognize fill me completely. "Maya Wilson," he whispered, "I've loved you for longer than you know. You've always been mine, even when you doubted it, even when you pushed me away." "I know," I whispered back. His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing over my trembling lips. "No more doubts," he murmured. "No more distance, no more walls. You're my home, Maya, only mine." And in that moment, the world fell away. We leaned into each other, our foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts racing. Slowly, tenderly, he captured my lips in a kiss, soft at first, testing, then deepening into something urgent and unrestrained. Every second held the weight of years of unspoken love, longing, and devotion finally released.